It's November 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the release of detainees and hostages between Israel and Hamas. Hamas has let 17 hostages go in exchange for 39 Palestinians held by Israel on the third day of the temporary ceasefire. Hamas says it's also willing to extend the truce beyond the initially agreed 4-day period to secure the release of additional Palestinian prisoners. Top diplomats of South Korea, Japan, and China met down in the port city of Busan over the weekend and agreed to expedite efforts for a trilateral summit between the leaders of the three countries to take place as early as possible. We are just a day away from voting to name the 2030 World Expo host. South Korea's Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is in Paris, meeting with delegates of BIA member states and will present a last-minute pitch. Hamas has released 17 hostages in exchange for 39 Palestinians held captive by Israel on the third day of an agreed 4-day temporary ceasefire. While the Palestinian military group hinted at possibly extending the ceasefire to release more hostages, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed he is open to the idea, but the war will continue full power once the ceasefire ends. Lee Seung-ja has more.
On the third day of hostage releases on Sunday, Hamas released 17 hostages, including 13 Israelis, in exchange for 39 Palestinians who had been held at Israeli detention centers. 33 of the Palestinians released by Israel were minors. The exchange came despite a delay of several hours after Hamas accused Israel of violating the agreement, but the issue was resolved through the mediation of Qatar and Egypt. The New York Times reported on the harsh conditions that the hostages faced through the stories of relatives who had spoken to those released by Hamas. The newspaper reported that the hostages lived in complete isolation from the outside world and returned looking emaciated. They mainly ate rice and bread, but there were times when they could not eat, leading to some of them losing as much as 6 to 8 kilograms during the ordeal. Among the released hostages from Gaza was a 4-year-old American girl who had been left orphaned after her parents were killed during the October 7th attack. While praising her release, U.S. President Joe Biden also called on the need to extend the ceasefire so that more hostages can be released moving forward.
That's my goal. That's our goal, to keep this pause going beyond tomorrow so that we can continue to see more hostages come out and surge more humanitarian relief into those who are in need in Gaza.
The Associated Press reports that Hamas is willing to release more hostages in exchange for an extended ceasefire. Citing sources close to the Palestinian militant group, they're willing to release an additional 20 to 40 hostages. With 58 hostages being released in the first 3 days of the 4-day temporary ceasefire so far, it's still short of the reported 240 people taken captive by Hamas on October 7th. Meanwhile, in a video statement to President Biden, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he is open to extending the current ceasefire, but once it is over, the military's ground operation will return in full force. According to the Prime Minister, while the current 4-day agreement can be extended to allow more hostages to be released, he stressed that at the end of the deal, Israel will continue its operations to destroy Hamas. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
President Yoon has returned from his week-long trip to Europe, which included a state visit to the United Kingdom and a 3-day campaign in Paris to promote Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. Our Oh Soo-young brings us the main outcomes of that trip, which went beyond reinforcing friendly relations and strengthened long-term security ties.
Seoul is building its clout as a trusted security partner in the Indo-Pacific region. That's according to experts following President Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the United Kingdom and France last week. Emphasising their shared values of freedom, human rights and the rule of law, Yoon's Downing Street Accord with UK leader Rishi Sunak showed an unprecedented level of security cooperation between the two sides, featuring deals on supply chains and the development of sensitive dual-use technologies. Co-developing artificial intelligence and quantum technologies to target North Korean missiles, as well as cybersecurity, which could act as a bridge to strengthen Seoul's links with the Five Eyes intelligence group, consisting of the UK, the United States, New Zealand, Australia and Canada, was also part of the deal.
The willingness to share intelligence with other countries, in this case South Korea, shows a high level of trust in the government of South Korea, also in the intelligence gathering capabilities of South Korea, the military of South Korea as well, right? So in a sense, it's proof that South Korea is considered to be a reliable partner by all these countries. Now, on top of that, these countries can gather intelligence that South Korea cannot. For example, in the Middle East, for example, in Russia. Even if we look at China, for example, they have different assets.
Seoul also reaffirmed its value-based cooperation with Paris, agreeing to work together on AI and quantum technology as Presidents Yoon and Macron exchanged views on North Korea's weapons collaboration with Russia and the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, particularly as South Korea begins its 2-year tenure as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council next year. South Korea has also been looking to multilateral platforms and like-minded partners to tackle global challenges that threaten peace, freedom and the rule of law in the international community.
First of all, because we have seen, as a result of growing US-China competition, but also the Trump administration being in office in the past, South Korea has been looking at other potential partners, not to replace the US, but really to complement what it gets from the US-Japan cooperation with Korea is very much driven by specific security threats. And I think in the case of Europe, this is not necessarily the case.
Beyond security and economic interests, South Korea has also grown its capacity to contribute to global development. The country's bid to host the 2030 World Expo has been highlighted as the chance to foster global solidarity towards the goals of tackling inequality, climate change, and emerging digital challenges that affect all societies. Presenting Busan as the world's solutions platform based on Korea's own transformation from a war-torn nation to a digital and cultural powerhouse, Yoon has held over 150 summits with 96 countries since its inauguration last year. Seungwoo, Arirang News.
The foreign ministers representing South Korea, Japan, and China met over the weekend in Busan as they seek to boost cooperation. They also decided to speed up efforts needed to resume their leaders' summit, which hasn't taken place for over 4 years. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has the key takeaways from Sunday's meeting.
Top diplomats of South Korea, Japan, and China sat down for talks on Sunday and agreed to expedite preparations for the upcoming summit between their leaders. The three officials met here at the Nurimaru APEC House in Busan and reaffirmed their efforts to hold a trilateral summit at the earliest convenient time. Following the meeting that lasted for about an hour and a half, Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin explained that the three officials have decided to put trilateral cooperation back on track as soon as possible.
We'll continue to work to make sure that the holding of the summit can be materialized in the near future.
Park's Japanese and Chinese counterparts Yoko Kamikawa and Wang Yi also highlighted the importance of cooperation between the three countries.
China will work together with South Korea and Japan to put the trilateral cooperation back on track and maintain a sound and steady development of trilateral relations.
I hope today's foreign ministers meeting could become the opportunity for the three countries to resume trilateral cooperation.
The last summit between the presidents of the three countries was held in December 2019 in China. It has not taken place for more than 4 years, largely due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of strained relations between Seoul and Tokyo. South Korea, as the chair of the upcoming summit, had hoped to hold a meeting before the end of this year. But the three countries have yet to agree on a specific date, and with a little more than a month remaining, arranging a meeting in 2023 is proving difficult. The Korean government is now reportedly aiming for it to take place sometime early next year. Meanwhile, ahead of the three-way talks, Park also held separate meetings with his Japanese and Chinese counterparts. While meeting the Chinese foreign minister, Park urged Beijing to play a constructive role in persuading North Korea to halt provocations. In response, Wang said China has always played and will continue to play the role needed to help stabilize the situation on the Korean Peninsula. During talks with Japan's foreign minister, the two sides discussed issues including a recent South Korean High Court ruling that ordered the Japanese government to compensate victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Park reiterated Seoul's position that it respects the agreement made in 2015 with Tokyo, which says the two countries agreed to finally and irreversibly resolve the issue. But Kamikawa called the court verdict extremely regrettable and urged South Korea to take appropriate measures. 배은지, Arirang News, Busan.
South Korea, the U.S. and Japan held trilateral naval drills in waters south of the Korean Peninsula on Sunday to bolster combined military preparedness amid North Korea's evolving nuclear and missile threats. The exercises took place in waters off the coast of Jeju Island and involved the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson. The nuclear-powered vessel arrived at a naval base in southern port city of Busan last Tuesday in a show of a defensive posture against Pyongyang's military provocations. The trilateral naval drills came a day after the North said its reconnaissance satellite launched on the 21st took photos of U.S. Army bases in South Korea as well as in Hawaii and Guam. And the U.S. Security Council is set to convene an emergency meeting on Monday local time to discuss responses to North Korea's launch of a military reconnaissance satellite. According to a UN statement on Sunday, the Security Council will hold talks in New York at 10 a.m. Monday local time at the request of 8 members, which included the United States, Japan, and the United Kingdom. South Korea will also participate in the meeting as an interested party. Now, the meeting comes as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned North Korea's launch of a spy satellite last week, calling it a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. So the top diplomats of Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing met over the weekend, where they agreed on collaborative efforts for what will be the first summit between the leaders of the three countries in 4 years. Let's discuss more about the outcomes of Sunday's meetup with Professor Kim Jae-chun this morning. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Kim, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, first of all, expressed concerns over the partial suspension of the 2018 military agreement and told his South Korean counterpart Park Jin that China will do its part to help stabilize the situation here on the Korean Peninsula. Now, what do you think Wang means by this?
Well, China's stance on the Korean Peninsula hasn't really changed much in recent years, and that stance is that stability is the most important concern before any other considerations, because if conflicts arise on the Korean Peninsula, the U.S. will definitely deploy strategic military assets to the Korean Peninsula, which could undermine China's strategic interest. You know, China wants to concentrate more on continuous economic growth. So all in all, China wants to avoid instability on the Korean Peninsula and confrontation with the U.S. over Korea. So stability is the top priority, particularly when China's economy is going through difficult times. Mm-hmm. That said, I don't think China will put pressure on North Korea and then discourage North Korea from launching provocations.
Right. China has never been really active when dealing with Korean Peninsula situations, like you say, especially in the recent years. And what kind of constructive role do you think, Professor Kim, China can actually play to manage some of the situations?
Well, not much, really. I think there will be a limit to which China can play a proactive role here on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, in terms of managing situations, mm-hmm. It's true. It's true that if there is one country that has certain leverage over North Korea, I think that country is going to be China. But as I said, I don't think China is going to exercise that leverage because North Korea's strategic value looms larger than before as the U.S.-China strategic competition is escalating. And North Korea has become a very important country to China as a strategic buffer zone. That's why China doesn't really condemn North Korea's provocations. Rather, China has become a very important patron for North Korea. And I think North Korea understands this new Cold War dynamic. That, I think, is the reason why North Korea has become much bolder these days, I mean, in terms of launching provocations, because provocations could raise many eyebrows in Beijing, but Beijing will eventually stand behind North Korea.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about the three sides who put their heads together down in the Busan city. The three foreign ministers of Seoul, Tokyo, and Beijing reportedly discussed, outlining details for the summit between the leaders of the three countries, which is unlikely to happen within the year. Now, when it actually does take place, what would that summit mean for the three sides, do you think?
The bilateral relation between South Korea and China has deteriorated over the years, and the bilateral relation between Japan and China is not at its best either. Then how can we mend fences? Trilateral summit can be an important start here, because the trilateral summit between three countries is an established diplomatic mechanism, so you don't really have to reinvent the wheel here. All you need to do is to reactivate this annual trilateral summit that has been suspended mainly because of COVID pandemic. Another advantage of the trilateral summit is that you can put aside difficult political and then security issues. Traditionally, the trilateral summit tried to tackle some of the easier issues such as disaster reliefs and climate change and all, rather than hard security issues. So I see many advantages here.
Definitely. All right, Professor Kim Jae-chan, thank you as always for your insightful comments. You have a great day.
Thank you.
South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is in Paris, making a last-minute push for Busan's 2030 World Expo bid, just a day left until the Expo vote. The PM, who co-chairs the bid committee for the World Expo 2030 Busan, departed for France on Sunday to take part in the General Assembly of the BIE, the organizer of World Expo. Now, according to PM's office, Han is scheduled to meet with delegates from BIE member states and articulate South Korea's vision to transform the World Expo into a platform addressing humanity's challenges, including war and conflict, the digital divide, and climate change. Han said in a Facebook post before his departure, "Until the last moment, with an unyielding spirit, I will do my best to deliver joyful news to the grateful people." So we are just one day away from the voting that will decide the host of the 2030 edition. And South Korea has come a long way to appeal its city, Busan, as the most suitable host. With hopes high now, our culture correspondent Seungwoo takes a look back on Korea's journey to try and bring the World Expo to Busan City.
The decision on which country will host the 2030 World Expo is just around the corner. South Korea's second-largest city, the southern port city of Busan, is competing against Saudi Arabia's Riyadh and Italy's Rome. While this year has been packed with expo-related events, Busan's preparations started years before.
Busan's efforts to host the Expo have been ongoing since 2016. Throughout the last 7 years, South Korea as a whole and the city government have worked hard. For example, Busan promoted its Expo bid to regions that it did not have close contact with before, such as Africa.
Korea has gone all out to bring the Expo to Busan. Designating the 2030 World Expo Busan as a national task, President Yoon, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, and Foreign Affairs Minister Park Jin traveled to dozens of countries to rally support. President Yoon even took the stage as a speaker during Busan's fourth presentation to the Bureau International des Expositions. The private sector joined forces too, with the leaders of Samsung, SK, Hyundai Motor, and LG going overseas as economic delegations, promoting the Busan Expo by screening promotional videos and installing large-scale advertisements. According to the Prime Minister, government officials and business leaders visited 180 countries, all told. Businesses also work diligently at home to boost domestic interest.
We teamed up with the Busan city government to establish this designated area for the 2030 World Expo in hopes of bringing it to Busan.
I didn't know that Korea had prepared so much for the Expo bid. It makes me realize how important this is. I really hope Busan wins.
Renowned cultural figures joined in too. BTS held a free concert in Busan as soprano Cho Soo-mi, along with singer Psy and aespa's Karina, took part in Busan's BIE presentation. But the heart of Busan's campaign lies with the unrivaled enthusiasm of the people living there. Thousands welcomed the BIE when they arrived at Busan train station in April for an on-site visit.
I would go after almost 20 years in expos, and I have been on many, many inquiry missions throughout expos. I don't think I have ever seen such an enthusiasm in the local population for an event.
Behind this was the Citizens Committee on Busan's bid for the 2030 World Expo, which also organized the Gwanghwaneoli Fireworks Festival and Expo-themed movie and music festivals with the public.
Busan has experience hosting major international events like the World Cup and Asian Games. So we have the know-how, the facilities and efficient transport infrastructure. That's why Busan is ready to successfully host the Expo.
With fingers firmly crossed, all that's left now is for the 182 BIE member countries to make a decision in Paris on November 28th.
부산 화이팅!
파이팅!
부산 엑스포 화이팅!
부산 화이팅!
송유진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young. We now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin with the Russia-Ukraine war, where over the past weekend, both sides have used large-scale drone attacks. Russia, on Saturday morning, launched its most intense drone attack since the start of the war on Ukraine, and Kyiv replied on Sunday with drones and missiles. No deaths have yet been reported on either side from the attacks. Ukrainian military reported that Russia launched a total of 75 Iranian-made Shahed drones targeting Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. Of the 75 drones, 74 were destroyed by Ukrainian air defenses. At least 5 civilians, including an 11-year-old child, were injured, according to the mayor of Kyiv. The Russian Ministry of Defense, meanwhile, reported that on Sunday, Russia shot down 24 Ukrainian drones over Moscow, Tula, Kaluga and the surrounding areas. The military also reported of 2 missiles destroyed over the Sea of Azov, and Russian air defenses intercepted 53 Ukrainian drones over the Ukrainian territory under Russian control. Now moving over to China, where concerns have been rising over a potential outbreak of a new infectious respiratory diseases. Following a request for information by the WHO, a spokesperson from China's National Health Commission said on Sunday that a novel virus was not behind the wave of illnesses and that influenza is the main cause, followed by rhinoviruses, pneumonia, RSV, and the adenovirus. While some experts have said that the current conditions are due to the lifting of COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, as exposure to common pathogens had been minimized during lockdown. Outside scientists are asking for the situation to be closely monitored. Now lastly, a cargo ship with 14 crew on board sank off the Greek island of Lesbos on Sunday. One of those aboard has been confirmed dead, with 12 others still missing. The Comoros-flagged cargo ship named Raptor was carrying 6,000 tons of salt from El Dakaila port in Egypt to Istanbul when it made a distress call to the Greek Coast Guard reporting a mechanical failure. According to the operating company of the ship based in Lebanon, 11 of the crew were Egyptians, while 2 were Syrian and 1 was an Indian national. Authorities are still searching for the missing crew members.
Good morning. Wet clouds are dropping light showers on most places this morning. Keep an umbrella handy. It will rain on and off through tonight before letting up from the capital. Northern parts of Gyeonggi-do could see up to 10 millimeters. The rest of the country could see spotty rain, and rain could turn to snow in mountainous parts of Gangwon-do province. Thick clouds kept yesterday's warmth overnight. Then highs will go up slightly higher than norms. Seoul tops out at 10 degrees. Daegu will hike to 14, Busan, Jeju cozy at 17 degrees with some late afternoon sunshine in Busan. Then this week we can expect brighter skies but much colder air creeping in again to the country, and it will remain freezing cold through the rest of November. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.